There is always opportunity in the markets if you know where to look for it. Here on this channel, I'm about bringing that service to your noggin of that information and that value to your portfolio by finding those opportunities. I will recap some of the opportunities that I have found recently and that have already played out, and I will talk about some other opportunities that have yet to make their move. I am Dr. Stock, Doctor of Education, and I cannot eat kangaroo meat because it makes me jumpy. We'll kick off this video by talking about some of the volatility plays that I've talked about recently and give updates on where they're at. And then we'll also talk about some of the other opportunities that exist. I'm talking Apple, Google, Tesla. I think they're all at interesting points with their price action that are most definitely worth taking a look at. Along the lines of value and service, I do have an offer that not only supports this channel, but you can also support yourself. That's hanging up to 16 free stocks using my link that's down in the description. I will tell you more about that later. For right now, I do want to get over to the Moomoo app itself, and I want to tell you about the different companies, about what I saw, about what happened, and what possibly could happen with the other opportunities that are out there. All right, let's kick things off with my friend Moderna that we're looking at here. Now, I said back earlier when it was up above $117 per share that we had a lot of downward pressure on this thing, that it is possible that we break on through, and it is also possible that should we break 117, that next psychological resist that we get is 100. Now, when we zoom in closer to take a better look at what's happened in the near-term price action, we actually went oversold on the RSI. When we take a look at this and you can see the volumes tapering off, less conviction in them, we actually bottomed out at about $95 per share. And back on the 15th of August, which is here where this red candle is, I said that we could possibly see a drop down to 85 or 86, or that we could see a pop up to 105 in the very near future for us. So if you're somebody to take advantage of straddle type option plays, for example, you spend a few $100, and what do you know, 2 days later, we actually did peak out at 105.59. So I said between 105 106, we actually landed right smack dab in between that. Now, if you're somebody who, because I talked about also the contrarian point of view where we have such downward pressure on this thing and being oversold that we could possibly see a recovery back up. So you took that bias in the bullish direction, that you bought call options right around $95 strike price. Well, then that thing went about $10 in the money. As a matter of fact, right now in the market, it's still about $10 in money, which means that would sell for at least $1,000 plus any time value that you would have left over on that option for something, depending on what time frame you went with, maybe it cost you a couple $100 in the first place. So that was one that I talked about. I said this thing's going to move soon, and what do you know, it did. So Amgen is the next one, and for this one, we crossed over this long-term downtrend that we had, which was the first bullish reversal sign that we got. And unless you want to count this sort of double-ish bottom that we had here to the long-term support at 216, and then we had earnings, which were darn good for Amgen, and then once that popped up over the 200-day, popped us back up into bullish territory, put that on my watch list, and about 5 or 6% later, here we are at about 265, and that 5 to 6%, let's zoom in, it took us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 trading days to get to that point. Now, it is possible that we pop off from here, still up to 270 yet, and it is possible to go beyond there up to that next area that we have right around 275. So we could possibly squeak out a little bit more to the upside. With it being overbought like it is in this extended run that we've had, I think that we do see a little bit of softness in the near term, that I do think that we could pull all the way back to 257. And if we get a strong pullback, we could see very good support coming at 250 for Amgen. So I think the volatility is still there. I think it's still worth putting out. Let's move on from that, and I want to go over to Google. Google has this momentum that's been trailing off. Their earnings were good. That popped them back up. Now where they were trailing off, they were entering into bearish territory. They're below their 50-day. They kind of flirted with a little bit, but they're still pretty much using it as support. And for that reason, I think Google can pull back in the near term to 125. So giving up $6 from where it's at right now. So that would be about 4 to 5% that we could see in the near term for Google. I think that this sooner pulls back than it skyrockets back upward. Now, mind you, market bias can be a big part of that. And right now, that actually leads me to my next stock that I have here, and that would be Apple. Apple's kind of neat to watch because I said if it wasn't on my channel, then it was over at the private Discord, which is available through the Patreon, which you can also find down in the description, where I offer even more service and more value, including my NVIDIA stock price prediction and my NVIDIA earnings forecast, which is coming up August 23rd in the aftermarket hours. You can go and check that out. I did say that we had a bit of a bear pennant forming up here, a bit of a bear flag, whatever you want to call it, and then we could possibly drop down further. We did. We see that about 174. I think that we could give up just a little bit more yet down to 170, but it is interesting because we do have something to pay attention to, a catalyst coming up for Apple. And so let me pop this up here. I'll tell you about Moomoo in a little bit. Here we go. Apple September event. This, with the 7 new products, this is coming up. Down here, the speculation right now is that it's September 12th or 13th that we could see that happen. And I do think that we could have a possible run up in Apple's price up to that point, but then selling off either at just before or following that event that we start to see a little bit more softening. So where does that price run up to? Well, let's bring Moomoo back up here. So leading up to that event, I think we hit 180, maybe 185, but leaving us below the 50-day. And I think following that event or near that event, we start to sell off and we settle back down towards that 170, 175 range like we're currently at right now, or I expect to see it at. I don't think the Apple shows us much below 170. Maybe it comes down to about 165 in the near term, but it's already gone through a significant correction. I think 170 is about the limit of that correction in the near term. So Apple, I think that we have a decent amount of volatility, at least as far as Apple goes, not what we saw with Moderna, for example. But for Apple, I think that there's some buying opportunities coming up and that we could actually make some near-term decent profits in a trade, a swing trade on Apple stock as well. So let's move over to Tesla. Tesla, I said 230 before 300, and I said the market almost made me a liar because it almost hit 300 back here. And then last I reported on, which I believe was also the 15th, we bottomed out that day at 232.60. Well, today we're trading at 224, and I think that we have a trip down. We can make it down to about 211 or 212 on this thing before we start to ride this channel back up. If we do penetrate that channel, I think that we have the 200-day to rely on it in the near term while we're watching that market softness on that. Now, if you do expect Tesla to drop more, there is something called TSLQ, which moves inverse of what Tesla does. So it's the Tesla Bear ETF that you could get into, non-diversified, has its own risks to it. It doesn't completely match up with Tesla's movement, but or inverse to Tesla's movement, but it's pretty close. So that's TSLQ. Now, for Tesla itself, I am a long-term investor, and these drops I look as buying opportunities, and I do think that we end up rattling off some of these bottoms. We have entered oversold territory, so I think Tesla is going to start moving back up for us pretty soon. I don't know that we've bottomed out yet, but I think that we're getting close to it. And don't forget that there are such things, depending on your position, your investment style, whatever it happens to be, selling put options to try and get a promise at what price you want while taking a premium on top of it can be a pretty awesome thing to do for lowering your cost basis. And even if not, then it keeps you out of making a trade and spending more of your capital. Now, it does have to be a cash covered put in order to do that. So it does kind of eat up some of your buying power. There's all sorts of risks in that. So for options, I am coming up with an options series over at my Patreon. I'm going to keep on posting to that. Like I said, that link for the Patreon is down in the description, along with my Tesla stock price prediction and my Tesla earnings forecast up through 2030. That is also available through that Patreon as well. So for Moomoo, here's how you get your 16 free stocks. Use my link down in the description, and that will get you, by signing up and depositing $100 or more, you get free stocks, 5 of them for $100, $50 cash reward to trade with at every tier, and for $1,000 or $5,000 deposit, you get 15 free stocks. That $5,000 deposit level gets you a free share of Tesla or Google, both incredible companies. Wonderful opportunity. And like I said in the beginning of this video, I said it's all about service and value. I bring the service here by telling you about the opportunities, and I keep that value going through those opportunities, and I further it with what's available over at the Patreon. If you're interested, that link is also down in the description. The community is heating up, people asking lots of questions. The amount of materials that I'm putting out are growing all the time, and I would absolutely love to have you over there. Be a community member, strong, positive group. And like I said, just building all the time, bringing those multiple perspectives, working to make our portfolios the strongest that they can be. Thank you guys for watching this video. I am Dr. Stock, Doctor of Education. Remember, my friends, that learning is earning, and we'll see you in the next video.